Hi there, I'm Guy from Zenith Optomedia. The hipsters in the audience can call me @GuyAbrahams. I would appreciate if you can tweet today because my boss thinks I'm drinking beer on a beach. The thing today is I'm going to talk to you now about why 365 thinking is better than 360 thinking, and why that small difference in numbers is going to make a big difference to the way in which you communicate for your brand and your brand delivers ROI. Knew I'd forgotten something. Right. So, last September, based on some Adobe analysis, The Economist quoted the following. According to marketeers, marketing has changed more in the past 2 years than it has in the past 50. And I know this is India, and you'll all say India's different, but the changes that are taking place across global marketing will be the same changes that are taking place tomorrow and the day after in India. What I'm going to talk to you about today applies the same wherever you are in the world. And fundamentally, it's a simple thing. The way that we've been taught to communicate, which is telling consumers what brands want to say, rather than what consumers want to hear, is no longer relevant. And clearly this worked when media was scarce, and brands and media owners controlled messaging. But in today's age of abundant media, consumers are taking control. Which is why today we need to be thinking about 365, not 360, because the days of the integrated 360 communication built around advertising ideas is no longer valid. Is no longer relevant in today's age. We should be concentrating on building ecosystems of communication around experiences and messaging that consumers want to hear and want to engage with across paid, owned, and earned media. So I'm going to talk to you about how this is done and why this is done and how you yourselves can make your brands more 365. And at the heart of it is the consumer journey, because the biggest thing that has changed in communication in the past few years, and why people are saying communication's changed more in the past 2 years, is our ability to identify people at different stages of the consumer journey and serve different messages to them. Let's take tablet computers, for example. I can tell you when someone's in the market for a tablet computer because they're reading about tablet computers online and they're looking at reviews and they're searching about tablet computers. I can even tell you who's going to be looking for a new tablet computer because I know that their tablet's got out-of-date software on it and can't be upgraded. Furthermore, I can tell you when someone's actually going to buy that tablet computer because they're looking for pricing on tablet computers, they're looking for specifics, text on tablet computers, and at the end of the day, through mobile phones, I can find out when someone is standing outside the tablet store. And the beauty is, not only can I identify these people and who they are, I can serve advertising and messaging and experience to them across more and more touch points. So today, the secret for marketeers is to start, rather than focusing on short-term campaigns, start focusing, transferring that effort into building long-term ecosystems. And on this journey, it's not about having matching luggage. It's not about having consistent matching ads. What it's about is having the fit-for-purpose luggage for the journey. And what this means is we need to start to go from trying to control brand communications in advertising and start to orchestrate brand experiences and engagements across paid, owned and earned media. Because clearly, ladies and gentlemen, we are entering a new age. And in this new age, even in India, where more and more consumers can avoid advertising, we need to find a new way. And we at Zenith Optimedia believe it's a simple fact that there's a value exchange. And what happens in that value exchange is very simple. Consumers will offer you attention, they will offer you attention, action, or engagement in exchange for relevant experiences. And we believe that the basis of these experiences, to make them relevant, to make them consumer-centric, not ad-centric, is simple and straightforward. They need to come from the brand purpose. The brand's purpose, which is the brand's mission in life, which has to both resonate with the consumer and be authentic for the brand. And it's a simple and straightforward fact that brand purpose leads to better communication. And the truth is, creative agencies love brand purpose. Anybody from creative agency here, when they get to work on a brand purpose brief, they create great ads. But from a media agency, brand purpose allows us to do much more, because we leave the area of product advertising and we move into the area of brand experience. And it means that we can start to deliver educational messages, entertainment messages, utilities that help consumers, and rewards that encourage consumers to buy across the consumer journey, across paid, owned and earned touchpoints. And there's another reason why we like brand purpose. Because as the ROI agency, we like brand purpose because brand purpose delivers ROI. Now, I know Indians like to read. Hands up who's read Jim Stengel's book, Grow. Okay, well, Jim Stengel was the ex-CMO of P&G, and in his book, Grow, he looked at the top 50 brands in the world and identified there was one consistent thing between all those top 50 brands in the world, and it was that they all had a very strong brand purpose. But I'm not talking about the top 50 brands. What's more interesting to me is that brand purpose works for nearly any brand. And how I've been able to prove this is there was some work done by NYU, and NYU looked at the 2020 marketing survey that involved over 10,000 marketers in 92 countries, including India. And what they looked at is they looked at those marketers and they looked at the companies they were from, and they then looked at the companies that were underperforming and overperforming. And what was very clear from this graph over here is the companies that where the marketers were engaging employees and consumers in brand purpose were 50% more likely to come from overperforming companies. And that, to me, more than Jim Stengel's top 50, is a clear thing about how brand purpose delivers ROI. The second and very, very important part here to understand is if we're going to deliver this brand purpose and value exchange, we need to start focusing not where most of the money is spent, but where, at the end of the day, the brand works the hardest. And where the brand works the hardest is in the authentic, owned assets of the brand. And we know from our touchpoint studies that we've conducted that earned and owned media per exposure deliver far more influence than paid media. So what we need to do at the end of the day is we need to optimize those owned assets first before you start putting money into paid media, because if paid media drives people to your owned assets, if your owned assets aren't optimized, you're wasting money. And I talk about these touchpoint studies, and it gives us a great insight, because at Zenith Optimedia over the past 10 years, we have undertaken 849 MCA-based touchpoint studies involving over 750,000 interviews, and what Touchpoint measures is brand experience, and it does brand experience by category, by brand, in a market, and it gives you the individual brand experience for the brand against that touchpoint. And this 750,000 people, 11,000 brands, this gives us the world's largest database of paid, owned, and earned touchpoints. And in the modern age of meta-analysis, we can do some really cool shit with this data. And I know that being in India, we all like a little bit of data. So, here's a little bit of data for you. These dots here, there's 11,000 dots. These dots are the 11,000 plus brands in the Zenith Optimedia Global Norms database for touchpoints. Up this axis here is the share of brand experience of each of those brands that they have in each of the categories they operate in earned media. It's kind of an earned, funky share of voice. And along the horizontal axis, you've got the same share of voice for paid and owned media. And what it tells us is something very, very simple, is that earned media needs to be earned. In the vast majority of cases, your earned media is a direct correlation of your investment in paid and owned. And if you want more earned media, because we all want more word of mouth and recommendation, we need to get the paid and owned to work harder together. And to do that requires us to optimize the system, not the silo. Because in today's ages, we've got lots of different people operating different systems, each of them working in a different way. And what we need to start to do is get together under one system that we can optimize together. And that requires three straightforward things. First of all, you have to have connected storytelling. Your narrative needs to work across touchpoints. The second is a fundamentally important thing, is you need to have good calls to action. You need to take people, connect people, have connected touchpoints of one to the other. And the third thing is you need to have connected technology, because the connected technology means you're able to optimize that ecosystem. There are three important things that are three skills we're all going to have to learn in the future going forward. So, how am I going to help you, give you 6 ways to make your brands 365 rather than 360? The first is a very simple thing. Let's start mining insight from new sources. You know, it's a funny old thing is that in today's age, we've been mining data from surveys and focus groups. I think there's an opportunity for us to mine reality, mine actual behavior that is taking place on the internet today. And I can tell you just in the last week that instead of looking at TGI that must be a year and a half old, I'm able to look at data across the world and be able to get insights as to what's going on. So rather than look at TGI data, I'm looking at Facebook data, I'm looking at surveys from the technological studies from the internet. So take Saudi Arabia. You probably, maybe or maybe not aware, that in April 2015, Web pages accessed by mobile in Saudi Arabia is 62%. That's in the last 15 days. That's versus 41% for the same time in 2013, a nearly 50% increase. But that's the country. Wouldn't it have been more interesting to find out about a specific target audience? And I think we've got a Nestle in the room. A classic Nestle would be new mums. So we can find out how new mums are accessing the internet in Saudi Arabia by looking as to how they access Facebook. And do you know that 95% of new mums in Saudi Arabia access Facebook with mobile-only devices? Equally, you can start mining, rather than the thousands on TGI, you can mine the millions on Facebook. Just 2 days ago, I was looking at the amount of people posting about style and performance of cars in the United States. So style and performance are not only the people who were posting, but the people who were responding to those posts and commenting and reading. So they have this amazing data. We could see for different brands as to what they were saying about style and performance, which is why you should stop maybe looking at focus groups and start looking at social listening to start to get insights about what consumers are really saying. It's why, in this day and age, pre-testing could very easily be replaced by placing ads on TrueView and seeing as to how many people skip or don't skip. It could be the way that we have to wait for brand tracking by various months, but I can tell you this, for a lot of categories, brand consideration, I can tell you what brand consideration is because you can look at the share or the change in share of searches within a category for various brands. This is reality mining, and this is where we're going to get insights in the future. And it's about getting with the real world. So next time we do a competitive review, don't just look at spend and ads. Look at the competitive consumer experience along the customer journey. Do a content audit of what's there and how it performs. Because we need to focus on that customer journey and determine what messages we should be placing where, that we've learned from reality mining. And we at Zenith Optimedia, we have a very simple, what we call the CX loop, which just is a way for us to be able to map the needs of consumers at the different stages of the journey and the touch points and the messaging that are required to deliver it. And when you're looking at this CX loop and you understand there's different needs and different messages at different stages, you have to start to change your perspective on target audience. Ladies and gentlemen, the bullseye audience in today's age is bullshit. It worked when you used the same audience, whether you were looking to recruit people into a habit with your brand or keep people in a habit with your brand. That worked fine with broadcast media, but as we have now media that's individually served to every different one of you in the room, depending on where you are on the journey, it's no longer valid. And quite frankly, if we're looking to keep people in the habit, we shouldn't be using paid media for that. We should be using owned media for that. And we should be saving up the paid media to start catching people at their points of change. When they're ready and looking for our brand, when they want to do it, rather when we want them to do it. Right, I'll try this. I know the Jim Stengel thing didn't work, but some of you must have heard of a guy called Andrew Pohl. Okay, Andrew Pohl is some big cool dude. He was in charge of mining data at Target in the US. And he could not only tell you who had a baby, because we all know that when you have a baby, that's a massive point of change across numerous different categories. He could tell you who was going to have a baby and how pregnant they were. Now, unfortunately, I'm sorry for those of you who know the story, some guy walked into a Target in Missouri with one of Target's pamphlets. And he went up to the manager. He was apoplectic with rage. He went up to the manager. He said, "Are you trying to get my daughter pregnant?" And the manager said, "I don't know. I'll contact head office. I'm terribly sorry. I'll come back to you." So a few days later, he called them back. He said, "I've called head office. They're going to come back with a reply, and I can only apologize to you." He says, "No, it's me who should apologize to you. Seemingly in this household, I'm the last to know." Equally, allegedly, and I don't know whether this is true, but it's a great story, on Netflix, they can tell on Netflix when someone is about to leave Netflix because they watch two films. One is Hotel Rwanda, and the other is The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And it's a very simple thing, is the people have watched all the films they want to watch, and then they're going through the list of films they ought to watch, and the last on that list of films that they ought to watch is Hotel Rwanda, The Boy with the Striped Pajamas. And finally, you want to know there's many categories where people are in habit. I don't know how many of you have worked in the analgesics category. Suppose in the analgesics category, 70% of people in the analgesics category are locked into the brands that they're using, and they sleepwalk to the fixture. You can't change their behavior, no matter how hard you want to shout with advertising. And I was challenged the other day. They said to me, Guy, can you identify people who are looking to change their headache brand? I said, very simple. Let's just look at people searching for headache on the internet. In fact, not only headache, but back pain. You can look at search volumes in the UK, and you can see there's a correlation between searches for back pain and public holidays. And I don't think it's about people having too much sex. I just think it's about people exerting themselves in the garden. But, I could possibly have got this wrong. So the need for lots of different content for different people at different stages of the consumer journey means we need more content. And I know it might be controversial, but to get this content, we might need to go outside the existing suppliers of traditional creative content. And there's some fantastic new creatives out there, and there's a whole new creativity we could embrace. Rather than creating ads, we can curate content with these people, whether it be YouTube channel, Twitter humorists, media partners, even through UGC consumers themselves. And what's great about these guys is they don't only understand how to connect the brand with consumers in a native environment, but more than that, they understand how to work with your data and technology. And while we know there's lots of different bits of content, little bits of content to deal with people at different stages of the consumer journey, there is still room for big creativity. And I'm not saying big advertising ideas. I'm talking about what we would call long ideas that are based around brand purpose. And if you look at the success of Milo in the Philippines, who have been number one for 25, 30 years, through their investment and their ownership of sport in the Philippines, or whether you look at the likes of Toyota, whose brand purpose is moving people, sorry, I've got to get that right, brand purpose is moving people to a better world. I was about to say a better place, didn't want to get it wrong. Moving people to a better world. And they've got an ideas program in the US, and this is really cool. They give away patents. They give away their patents to people who invent things that better society. What better way about moving people to a better place than that? And then you have Johnson & Johnson's Baby Center, which is a stroke of genius. Johnson & Johnson Baby Center is the world's #1 baby media. Most people don't even know that it's owned by Johnson & Johnson. Not only is it the most effective brainwashing and propaganda factory for a brand I've ever seen, it also works as an advertising medium for them, but even more than that, it's an insight media for them. They know from the content that people are consuming on the sites, in reality, they know what mums actually care about. And that's an awesome property. And then finally, I wouldn't be in India without saying something about India. I just love Lifebuoy. I love the way that Lifebuoy has hijacked the whole global hand washing program and they've made it their own. And I know because I've worked with other competitors in the business and they all say, but we all fund hand washing. You all fund hand washing, but there's only one person who you associate it with it from a branded point of view, and the point of view of what they've done within India is exemplary. So, one of the things about those pieces, now, hopefully we can keep it a secret, because Frank, who's in charge of our Touchpoints database, wouldn't want me to say this. But those big, long ideas, they produce more brand experience at a cheaper price than equivalent TV advertising-based activity. So there's gold in those hills, which is why the likes of Coca-Cola have moved to a content-based model, built around brand purpose, with big, long ideas around happiness and around sport and around music, and they have fantastic activation. And I know that you guys are thinking, yes, there was that activation, this baby here, the Pakistan-India one that won all those awards. Isn't that great? Meh. So you had 700 people who actually interacted with the box. 10,000 people watched it. 18 million engagements. Size of a large TV show, probably a small TV show in India. Take the Smile campaign in Thailand, which you may not have heard of. After the floods in Thailand, Coca-Cola decided to start a movement to get Thailand to smile again, to be the land of smiles again. They didn't connect with 700 people. They connected with 1 million people, and from it they got 137 million engagements, and this is the kiss of it. Coca-Cola went to #1 in Thailand for the first time over Pepsi in 25 years. That's what I like. That's the content I want to see. That is what we should be aspiring to. So, in conclusion, we don't want to be briefing or thinking about things based on old insight. We want to be mining reality to get new insights for our briefs. We don't want to do campaigns anymore. We don't need campaign ideas. We need always-on thinking and platforms. We shouldn't just be looking at channel planning. We should be looking about how all those channels work together. We shouldn't think about just measuring advertising, but we should be optimizing that ecosystem, and we should be directly linking it with sales, because the data we get from the digital space should allow us to do that. And I know we're in India, and I know you're not advanced in the digital space, but I first came to India in 2006, and people said to me, there'll never be IPTV here, and there is. Anything that happens in the rest of the world will come to India, and I can say to you this, you are privileged because you can see the future. You just need to look to see what's coming down the pipe. So finally, we want to stop a siloed marketing structure where there's an e-commerce team and there's an advertising team. There just needs to be one team, integrated, combined, focused on the customer journey, giving messaging that consumers want to hear, not just what brands want to say. Because that, ladies and gentlemen, is what's going to deliver ROI, not just in the future, but if we start working on it, it'll deliver ROI today, tomorrow, and many years in the future. Thank you very much.
So you can see, Guy, that you had a huge impact. So I've got no questions yet. And,
Okay.
People in India definitely love data. And, it's true that we love data crunching. So, while you were speaking, there are some obvious questions which we can probably, discuss, or you can kind of interweave them when I'm asking you some questions. We keep discussing data every time. Nowadays it's become one of the most big issues or questions. But if I may ask you that when you handle so much data and you come to so many inference points, how do you streamline it? Means, how do we get into the fundamentals of getting it to the right data points and then trying to understand what is the most effective? Because sometimes you see so much data and you don't know which one to take, which one to keep, which one to sacrifice.
Yeah, okay. So I think there's a fundamental thing at the beginning of this,
Yeah.
which is clearly when you start in the industry like I did as a sort of a little grad, and what you spent, certainly 25 years ago, you spent a lot of time doing was, you thought the job was about collecting data. And then you realized pretty soon after that it's not about collecting data, it's about the insight that data gives. And you thought, great, I've now come up with some insight. But actually, it's not the insight, it's the actions that you take from that insight. And then I thought my job was done. But then I discovered, certainly in today's age, not only do you have to understand the actions that data tells you should do, but you also need to be able to make them happen, not just within your organization, but within your client organization as well. Because we work in an industry where you need to have a client to be able to manage the other side of the process. So I think the first thing we have to understand is that we all have to change together. And there's no point having agencies that are uber digitally minded and having clients who don't have the right skill sets there to deliver it. And the other point you're making with all these bits of data, how to get them in one place so we can easily understand them. And that was the piece that I was talking about. So you need the connected narrative across touch points. You need to connect the touch points together with good calls to action and great conversion rate optimization. And the final thing here is about the data stack. Because what you need is you need to, when you're doing a piece of activity, you need to choose the right data stack so that you can optimize. And in the future where, audiences will be served across multiple media and they won't be sold based on the media that they're coming from, but they'll be sold based on who they are and their behaviors elsewhere, we believe that you will be, when you're planning campaigns, the first thing you'll want to plan is which data stack you should be using, whether it be the Facebook stack, the Google stack, the Adobe stack, the Amazon stack. And these things will be the equivalent in the past of the TV channel you chose.
If I may, kind of connect another question to why I asked that question on data. What happens with something which you did mention on a slide, which was the journey and consumer experience. And when I saw the title of your slide of 365, for a moment I thought you were talking about marketing 365 days of a year versus planning for 3 months of a year. So I was trying to figure out that with this such a dynamic world where habits, behavior, likes, dislikes changing in such a regular basis, how does one collate this data, come to an inference, and realize that the behavior cycle has become very dynamic? Means I need to keep changing. I need to keep either rediscovering data or I need to move very quick.
So I think there's an interesting point here, is because I think in the historic way we thought about campaigns was you start with an advertising idea and then you try to build the media afterwards. I think when you look at ecosystems, you need to build your ecosystem long term, and that ecosystem needs to be self-learning and needs to be ongoing in development. It's going to always be in beta. And the campaigns which you do feed into that ecosystem, and the advertising creativity feeds into that ecosystem. But you need to build the ecosystem first, and you need to think about the ecosystem, because before there wasn't the ability to create them. Now there is an ability to start linking touch points together, and as we link those touch points together, those ecosystems are not there for one campaign, they're there for the future, because the engineering involved in building them is enormous, and the client construct required to deliver them is enormous.
So if you see the next question, which is, I don't know, questions are coming in a lot. So this question comes in from Ambi. It's again related to the question that I asked you about data and the consumer life cycle becoming so dynamic. Is our world becoming drip? Drip is data rich, insight poor.
No. I think that the truth is that there will be many tools as we go forward that allows us to mine the data from Facebook, mine other sources of data. I think what you look to do is you need not to start with the data, but you need to start with a thesis of how this category works and how your brand works within the category, and you use that thesis to start to draw up your customer journey. And then you look to the data to see whether that thesis is right or wrong. If you spend the time digging around the data for the answer, you'll be there for not days or months, probably years. You need to have the conviction of your experience in this business and use that wisdom you created over the years to come to some conclusion. You need to start with the thesis and use the data to prove it afterwards.
I guess this point keeps coming up because, the reason why we're calling it insight, because, the classical model was always about a strong insight. You would read about the consumer behavior, you go into a strong insight, and then came the idea and your execution, or whatever that creative thought was. And data playing such a critical role that, I guess that's where the bit of a conflict keeps happening. Do you see that happening, or?
No, I think it's very straightforward. I think what you can do is when you look at the thing is that we know our consumers and the ones who are in the habit, and what we need to do is create a system that keeps them in the habit. That's relatively straightforward. The more interesting thing I find is finding those people at the points of change.
Absolutely.
So there is a simple thing that lots of change is done by changes in lifestyle or time of life. I was working on a small consumer appliance the other day, and it was fascinating because the reason that people were buying the small consumer appliance because they'd just changed jobs, they'd just got engaged, and it was these life moments was why they were buying. Once you understand why they're buying those things, then we can start to build activity towards doing it.
If I may move to the next one, there's Nagesh who's asked us a question. Is the multiple serial media platforms aiding in brand loyalty or brand disloyalty, given the high surfing among the audience?
Oh, I think that I think that the surfing in this has got nothing to do with loyalty. I think loyalty is a function of you having a good enough product in terms of product performance to keep people in the habit. If you've got something that works really well, you rarely look to change it. So I think that we don't need to worry about loyalty. We need to worry about growth, and growth comes from new users. And the beauty is when you communicate to new users, you need more communication to change their behavior. But existing users, notice all your communication more. Remember, if you've got packaging in their home, that's the medium. And if they're seeing that on a daily basis, why spend your advertising money doing that when you should be spending your advertising money chasing those new users at the points of change?
I think you've given the wrong time. Will the influence of the media agency go down as more clients build their own media properties? Do you see that happening?
Oh, I think that there's just a fantastic opportunity. If our clients start to build really great media properties, then our job is really easy because we can send people to those properties. I actually believe that, we've been over the years renting communication, where actually I think in the future brands should a bit like when you had creative talent in ads, you did a buyout. I think we should buy out consumers by investing in owned assets. Have great owned assets, and then what we spend our advertising doing is trying to get people to those owned assets and recruit via there. And the beauty is, if you get the business model right, you know how to turn it on and turn it off. And advertising doesn't become a sort of brand building, airy-fairy world. It becomes a performance marketing world when you can see directly the result of your advertising investment.
So I'll ask you maybe one last question. Again, a question which probably you would have heard, and we keep discussing this everywhere. With so much of digital data at hand and so many engagements, which is so dynamic on the social media platform, where do you see the TV, print, or the classical industry headed?
I think the print medium is going to take on new forms in terms of how it becomes news media across digital devices. I think more interestingly that TV is just going to become like digital video, because what you can do already in many markets is that you can serve ads individually to homes, and you can choose the demographics of the home, so you can tell whether that home is at a point of change. You'll know whether someone in that home is likely to be having a baby, and then you'll be able to serve your baby ads to that home. I think advertising will become, it won't be broadcast anymore, it will be served, and it will probably sold in an auction model. Everything will go towards programmatic, and we will be using the machines for us to be able to optimize our campaigns. And yes, there is future within video, but not video in the way that we know it today.
So that kind of sums it up again. Thank you so much, Guy. Thanks for your time. I'm sure you're going to enjoy India.